We did, however, reach the Honourable Louise Arbour, who conducted the review. Hi, Madame Arbour. Pleasure to welcome you back to our program.
Pleasure to be here.
Was the scale of the problem and the failure to fix it in line with your expectations going into this process, or did it exceed them?
Well, I think it had been well documented. I mentioned in my report, between the report of Justice Deschamps, we've had tons of information, including the 19,000 claims that were filed in the Hyder-Beatty class action. Statistics Canada, the Auditor General looked at it. So I think this was less an exercise in the kind of diagnostic appraisal of the problem than trying to look seriously at how to move forward.
When you are looking at how to move forward and ultimately reflecting on why things haven't moved forward up until this point to the degree that many had hoped or wanted, is it attributable to the Canadian Forces kind of thinking it could fix itself, or a lack of political will?
I think it's probably a bit of both, but it's very much attributable, I think, to the idea that an organization like that is so set in its way, so close to external input of any kind. I mentioned that they can't recruit outside. So you join the armed forces at 18 and, if they need another colonel, they can't recruit from the German army. It's all homegrown, very closed in, very well respected, so reinforced in its assumption that it can do everything well. So I think that's at the heart of the difficulty to keep up with the pace of things happening outside in a Canadian society that's moving very quickly towards a pluralistic environment, diversity, and so on. People in the military, they wear something called a uniform. Uniformity is part of the kind of the DNA of the organization. So the integration of women has obviously not proven a success, nor is the integration of everybody who's not historically a white male.
The organization is still dominated, though, by white males. Based on your work during this, what level of confidence do you have that they are, beyond just playing lip service to the idea of accepting a cultural shift?
Well, I was worried, I have to say, coming into this exercise about this idea of culture change. I think it's very amorphous. Mm-hmm. It could mean a lot of different things to different people. It's very hard to measure, to have key performance indicator of culture change is not obvious. And it's an organization that tends to, as I put it in the report, very often moves much more quickly than it thinks. Is not particularly keen on being challenged by external actors about radical structural changes. But the reason I put some recommendations, I think, to give myself assurances against that. And one of them is, instead of putting my recommendations on the list, the map of hundreds of existing recommendations, and that's what we're talking about, hundreds. Mm-hmm. I said, and the minister accepted, please tell us which ones you don't like. Which ones of my recommendations you have no intention of implementing, if any. So this morning I heard, we intend to implement all of them. Good. Now, appoint an external monitor that's going to keep your feet to the fire on this. She said, we're going to do that. That's as far as I could go in having confidence that I think on this occasion, I will not end up another number on a big map of
Are you worried
existing...
about? Pardon the interruption. Are you? I gathered, and I watched your press conference too. Like, you seem genuinely worried that you might, just because of what's happened in the past.
I think this idea of an external monitor, somebody who's going to be on it, and again, the minister is committed to telling Parliament by the end of the year if there's something they don't want to do, if they don't want to give exclusive jurisdiction to the civilian courts for sexual assault committed by the military, they're just going to have to say it. And so if they don't say it, they say, we're going to do that. The external monitor is going to be there to make sure it doesn't take 7 years. It took 7 years for the military to enact 7 years after it was implemented in the civilian system. They are coming up at the end of June with a Declaration of Victims' Rights, 7 years after the civilian system. That's why I say you need somebody from the outside who's going to make sure that if you're actually serious about doing it, you're going to get it done.
On the substance of your recommendations, and I'll take the one that you just highlighted, for example, of moving to the exclusive, criminal sexual offenses exclusively to the jurisdiction of civilian courts. And then also even the other one, which I know is going to generate a lot of headlines, and that's essentially reconsidering the existence of the military colleges here in Canada. If the government ultimately decides against going ahead with those, which is a possibility, is the end result in jeopardy? Is the idea that this can be fixed in jeopardy if those recommendations, those significant ones, are not implemented ultimately?
I would have a lot of concern about both. I would have a lot of concern about keeping the concurrent jurisdiction of court martials, basically the military system, and the civilian courts for the prosecution of criminal code sexual offenses. Because presently, the jurisdiction is concurrent and the military is keeping it all to itself. And everything I've seen since I issued an interim report is that if we maintain this system of dual competence, the military wants it and the civilian system doesn't. So it's going to end up exactly where it is. And I don't think it belongs to a system that is not plugged in to the evolution of thinking in Canadian society about all the myths and stereotypes about sexual violence and sexual assault. That has to go to the civilian system. And the only way to get there, I think, is to give the civilian system exclusive jurisdiction, as it does for murder and as it did prior to 1998 for sexual offenses.
And what about the schools? Should they be scrapped, I guess, for lack of a better term?
Well, I didn't go that far, you saw in the report. No. I didn't say they should be abolished. Certainly, my own sense is that I would certainly prefer that they not be maintained as an undergraduate institution. I think everything I see there causes me a lot of concern. And in fact, I think the education that officers get in civilian universities while undergoing military training is a vastly superior guarantee that they will remain anchored in Canadian values. In civilian universities, women are half the population. In the military colleges, they're around 25%. They live together all the time. They're young. Their system, it's an old boys, head boy British school system of giving power to senior boys, head boys. I think that the entire system for undergraduate development of leadership and competence is very problematic. So, but I didn't have enough to verify the quality of the academic stream. And, more than half the officers in the Canadian Armed Forces are trained in civilian universities, and they do just fine. So what I'm saying is they need to put, particularly experts in education, take a very good look at it. And I would hope maybe move out of undergrad education. Maybe they could do a lot of their graduate work. They do a lot of graduate studies in the military. They could use these wonderful facilities in Kingston and in Saint Jean, but not, I think, under the current arrangements.
Okay, Madame Arbour, I'm out of time. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.